Hello, welcome to Authors on iTours, and today we have the pleasure of interviewing Kelly Smith, the author of The Wedding, which is on tours with I Read Book Tours. Kelly Smith is a three-time published author. She first came on the scene with her debut novel, Signs in the Rearview Mirror, Leaving a Toxic Relationship Behind. After healing from her toxic relationships, she soon realized dating after a toxic relationship was difficult, which then led her to write Out of the Darkness. Her sophomore book, Out of the Darkness, is about her experiences with healing after abuse, dating, and finding love again. Sunny Day Publishing published all of her books. Kelly Smith is an award-winning writer, and she writes for Elephant Journal and HuffPost. Kelly is a dating expert for the online relationship and dating magazine GoDates. Kelly Smith is a certified relationship and dating coach who works with clients who are trying to rebuild their lives after an abusive relationship ends. And Kelly is a Boston native who moved to Austin, Texas area in July 2003 with her three sons. Media expertise: Kelly can speak on topics including domestic violence in teen dating, narcissism, and toxic relationships, women as the abusers, recovering from an abusive relationship, dating again after an abusive relationship, narcissism in both men and women, and living as an adult child with a narcissist parent. So today we are talking to Kelly Smith about her new book and about many of these topics. So strap yourself in for a great interview. Hello, this is Lauren Carr, and welcome to Authors on iTours, a podcast devoted to authors, book bloggers, and other book lovers alike. Hey, Kelly, great to have you today on Authors on iTours, and you are on tour with your new book, The Wedding. Why don't you start by telling us about your upcoming new release?
Well, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited about this. I love any opportunity to talk about my new book, The Wedding. So The Wedding came out in September 2023. It is my first fiction, my third book, but first fiction novel. So I'm very excited to introduce The Wedding to so many people.
Oh, great. And the plot is, I assume, because of the title, a wedding, and now you describe it as a contemporary romance and friendship book. Is it like a chick flick of, the friendships, or, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's pretty much I kind of want to say like like a girl group. Friends that like come together. Some have been friends since they were younger. Other ones come a little bit later in life. They meet together. They all have our normal struggles of finding love, losing love, relationship issues with each other. Because, in any friend group, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be some kind of conflict. So each character represents sort of those like dynamics of friend groups. So throughout this book, I love this book particularly because of the wedding itself. So we have these four friends that come together, and you don't know who's getting married. Someone is getting married.
So that's a mystery.
It's a very big wedding mystery. As you're reading, you read about the journey of these four friends coming together, their relationships, and then their actual friendships, and how they stick together through good times and, of course, through bad times. But as you read, every few chapters or so, you will come across wedding planning. But you don't know who is planning the wedding. So as you're reading, you're guessing, like, who could it be? Could it be this character and this character? How many, different characters I have? So who is actually planning the wedding? So when you get to the actual chapter of the wedding, because it's an actual wedding invitation, you find out who it is. And then, of course, I had to have cliffhangers with each couple. So at the end, you figure out exactly what happens to every single couple. But on the way to that destination, you have no idea who it is.
Oh, now you're really big into relationships because you actually are a relationship coach.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And your previous two books were about abuse and abusive relationships and everything. What made you decide to do a novel, go to fiction? What was that journey?
So
That
I'm so sorry. I've always wanted to write fiction, always.
uh,
Since I was little, I came up with creative stories and I had ideas of what I wanted to write, but I was nervous. I was nervous to do it. I wasn't sure how it would go. I didn't have the belief in myself to be able to write fiction and to really pour myself onto pages. So instead, when I went through a toxic, abusive relationship and then I got out of it, I was like, people need to hear about this. Because when you're in something toxic and something abusive and it's not something that you know much about, to a degree you think you're the only one. Like, I'm the only one that's been through this. There has to be one or two other people going through this. I'm going to help them. But once I started to write and once I started to heal and recover, I realized, yeah, I'm not the only one. So other
uh,
people need to hear like my story as well as how I got out and what life looks like after. So my first book, Signs in the Rearview Mirror, Leaving a Toxic Relationship Behind, I wrote how we get in, why we stay, and how to get out. In my second book, Out of the Darkness, I write about healing, my actual healing journey, and then dating again, and then eventually finding love.
mhm. Now, how did this the writing process work for you with in healing? And did the writing actually help you? And what was the writing process? And how did that different when you wrote your nonfiction with the fiction? Or
So it
were
definitely,
they
so
the
right,
same?
yeah, because like, writing my first two books gave me the confidence to try my hand at the wedding. So I was
Okay.
like, okay, I can do it. It's, did pretty well. They both did, pretty well. So I was like, let me just try this. Writing, the difference between the two was the first two books was like, writing my first book was like summoning the devil because I had to like go back in and relive that. The second book was a lot easier to write. It was a little bit more fun. But this book was the best time of my life. I had so much fun building these characters, seeing them come to life. As I was writing some of the situations, I was like, oh, what is she doing? This is so crazy. Why would she do this? So it was definitely a lot more fun. It was more exciting to really just dig into my creativity and see what was really in my head.
Mhm. Did you put any of yourself into your fictional characters,
Mhm.
or people you knew, or people you used,
Yeah,
or
I did. I did. I myself. I have. Well, it's funny because when I first wrote this, and then when you go back to kind of edit to see if everything matches up, I realized I made every single character with red hair and green eyes, and I was like,
oh,
okay,
oh.
I probably need to change at least three of those characters to look a little different. But each female character has a little bit of me in them. And you'll see
Mhm.
that with especially the character Grace, because she finds herself in something toxic and something that she has to get out of. So you'll definitely be able to see that. And then you'll see myself in Sydney because she has to start her life over again. So it's different parts of my life that will come through, but not like, oh, that's definitely her.
Okay. Now tell us about the publishing process. Now this is your third book, so you probably got it pretty well down now.
Mm-hmm.
Or what was your what was the process for publishing your first book as compared to this one, and what changes did you make?
Yeah, my first book I was new, so I had no idea what I was doing. I thought the publishing process was you type it out, you send it, and they publish it in like 5 days. I came to find out that's not entirely true,
No.
especially with a company like with a publishing actual publishing house. It's a little bit different because they have their publishing calendar, so which is
Yeah.
different from a regular calendar. So when you write a book about the wedding, it needs to come out at around wedding season, and like when that's. But then as the author, and you're so eager to get your stuff out, you're like, no, do it now. But of course, they know what they're doing. So the edits were shocking to me the first time around, where we kept going back and forth and back and forth. And then by my third book now, I'm definitely getting it down a little bit more as to like what it should look like when I give it back to them, like how I want it to look, that sort of thing. Now I understand a little bit more of how it works, so it's not as frustrating, if you will.
Now, did you find, because you wrote nonfiction and self-help, for lack of a better term, books about relationship, you wrote nonfiction before, and now you're writing fiction. What is different about in the writing process? Now, you said this time was a lot more fun, probably because it wasn't as painful. But what was the difference this time?
So when you're writing a nonfiction about yourself in particular, you know exactly how it happened. So you don't have to check your timeline. You don't have to make sure you said it was in January and then 3 chapters down, it was actually in March. So you have to like make sure your timeline adds up and like what the characters are saying adds up in chapter 3, but also in chapter 28. So for me, that was a little bit different where I was like, oh no, you can't just write willy nilly. You have to make sure you have your timeline. You have to make sure it all makes sense, that it all adds up and that things are realistic. So in the nonfiction, you write how you don't have to think about those things because everything that happened to you was realistic. But in the fiction world, you have to make sure if you're going to talk about a brain surgeon that you have it correct.
Yeah.
And
because
that was,
people will come back on you and send you emails.
They will. And I'm just like, okay, hopefully I get all of this. So I'm currently recording the wedding for Audible. And I realized with myself in fiction, I wrote words that I cannot pronounce, but they work. So he's in my ear and I'm like, how do you say this? And then he's like, I don't know. So he like, will Google it and then we'll hear it and then I can like say it. But then the other day I was like, why did I use words I can't pronounce? Like, this is so crazy. But you don't realize you can't really pronounce them until you're reading it out loud and you're recording it for someone.
So now is the wedding is available in audiobook?
Not yet. I'm just about done recording.
Okay. Tell us about the process. Are your other books an audiobook?
Yeah. Yes.
Are you the narrator?
I am.
You are? Okay. Tell us about the process of converting it to audiobook.
I think if any author who writes a book should 100% record for Audible. And if they can, do it themselves. It is probably the most exciting thing about being an author is bringing your book to life. And realistically, it's probably the closest it'll ever come to being brought to life. So you get to read it in the way you want the reader to read it in a sense. So you know the characters, you know how they feel, so you can really bring that through. But I think like the process of doing that was really one of the coolest things that I had ever done. It's a little time consuming, of course, because you go and you have to sit there in a room with your microphone and your screen and you read your book and you have a person that's with you if you do it in a studio who can help guide you and say, hey, say it this way or say it that way. But it is definitely one of the coolest things I think I've ever done. And I'm so excited about the wedding coming out on Audible. A lot of characters in this book, so different voices. And then I also set all of my books in New England because I have an accent. So because I wanted to read the books, I just made every book I'm going to write is going to be set in New England because I want to be able to read it myself with my authentic voice without having to like change and be someone different.
Now, do you have a studio or are you recording it at home?
I have a studio that I go to. So I found out when we first started doing this that Audible in particular has a certain way it needs to be recorded in and they will reject it. So I went to a studio, had them do it, and they got everything set up and so far so good. And it's been really great to have a guide sort of with me to do this, to make sure I say things in the right way. I went in for a trial with the wedding a few months before I started, and the feedback was, hey, you read like too fast, you got to slow it down. So they're really good at keeping the pace and making sure everything is consistent.
And are you so what, how about the characters? Do you do a little bit of acting? Who would you now you were saying that that you believe that, and if you have a book and and you put, because my books are an audiobook, but I don't do the narration because I hate my voice, and my voice makes me cringe. Who do you think shouldn't do their own voices or their
I
own audiobooks?
Probably someone who doesn't like the sound of their own voice because you have to listen to
Yeah,
it.
so you don't have to I know.
Yeah.
So, and, like for example, my characters or my protagonists are male, so that's why that. So besides not liking my own voice, I have to have male narrators. Do you think that there are some people, like you said, you set your books in New England,
Mhm.
and because you have a New England accent, so you're able to do that? What other advice would you give to somebody who has a book and is considering doing audiobooks?
I would say just go in for a trial and see what you think. Go in, book the session for an hour. See if you. An important situation that you have to make sure you pay attention to is who you're recording with. If you're recording in a studio where the people are not paying attention and they don't really care, you're not going to have a good time. You have to make sure you have that rapport with the person that's in your ear, because they're in your ear the whole time and they're constantly, talking to you, giving you suggestions. So you have to make sure that that relationship is really good and you trust that person to be able to do that. I also think with the voices, it can be tricky. I do all the voices in my book. I do the male
Mhm.
voices, and I didn't realize how many male voices I had until I started doing them. But the tricky part is going from one character to another, especially during an argument when you're male, female, and they're arguing. So
Uh,
it's the female and then the author reading just the interim and then going into the male. So that can be a little interesting. Acting is a very big part of this, because if you are
mhm.
going to read a line where the person is mad and you just read it like, oh, Sally across the street, she was so mad, it's not going to give what you want it to give. So you have to make sure that you really practice that, or feel like you're capable of doing that on your own in the room when you're by yourself. It's really fun. But I would say book a 1 hour session, try it out, see how you do. I would also say make sure you have that great relationship with the person in your ear, and that you have a reliable studio that either has done Audible before, or they know the process and they're willing to look at the process to see what it is.
Now, where would an author find these studios? Because go to a studio. Are they like everywhere or
Mhm. Yeah, they pretty much are. If you just put in recording studio, a lot of studios now will do it for podcasts. So you can go in and see if they do it. And if a studio does not advertise that they do Audible, then ask them, because they may be. When I started working with my studio, this is my third book with them. And I love them. I
Mm.
wouldn't go to anyone else. So when I first started with them, I was their first audiobook. They had never done
Mhm.
it before. But when I asked them, they were excited. They're like, yeah, let's give this a try. And now they do them all the time. So so
Now,
definitely
does it
reach
cost
out.
you money out of pocket? Do you pay for the time there?
Yes, you definitely
Yeah.
pay for the time. Yeah, but the
Mhm.
thing that I have found as an author is when I get my royalties, I basically sell the most of audio.
Mhm.
That's what it is. Yeah, the audio is the one
Yeah.
that sells the most.
Now, my audiobook producer, he has his own studio in his home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and, so and so what he did was he converted a
Oh,
guest
okay.
bathroom
Nice.
into a studio because it
Hmm.
was soundproof,
Yeah.
because you have to cut out all the background noise,
Hmm.
for that. So
Yeah.
he actually has his own studio and, and he's got acting experience and he works in television. So, but, I lucked into him.
Yeah.
So,
That's
and, as a matter of fact, on Authors Off the Cuff, the other author, C.S. McDonald, she just went through having to find a new audiobook producer because her audio producer died. And so she had to do the search for
wow.
finding a new producer. But she actually has been talking about maybe possibly her own doing her own books, doing them herself, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would say,
but
yeah, I think it's fun. I encourage all authors, like, go try it. Go see how it goes and see what you think. And it's so
it
fun. I mean, it's daunting, but once you get into it, like, it's fun.
yeah, it's a growing market, because all my books are in audio and it is a growing market. I remember with my books, I've done over 30 books. And whenever, whenever I started publishing books, they were print, and then Amazon actually came to me and said, "We're going to start doing ebooks. Would you like to
Mhm.
maybe make your books available?" And I had a couple books out, and I was, and it just started coming in, the royalties, and I say audiobooks are where ebooks used to be. More and
Yeah.
more people are doing that. It is a growing market, and I do encourage people to, if you're, and if I have authors come to me who aren't in the audiobook, I said, maybe you might want to consider doing that,
Yeah. I
because
think
a lot of people are doing that.
I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. And recording it yourself is fun. Plus, it's less expensive because you don't have to pay anyone. So
Yeah.
I just pay the studio fee and then that's it. But I just think it's great. I think any author that has a book, I highly recommend at least giving it a shot just to see like how they do. I think it's a great fun experience.
Are there any genres that you don't recommend, or categories? Like maybe
I
children's books? I know some authors who actually have children's books in audio.
Oh, I think that's great. I think that's great, especially if you're driving with your kids and you don't want to listen to those, kid songs. You can put on a book. That would be like so fun. Yeah, I think like anyone should do it. I do think that it can be a little embarrassing with some of it because in the wedding, I'm not a smut writer. I can't do it. I wrote like one paragraph in this book, and my son's dog was looking at me the whole time. I was embarrassed. So I was like, this is awful. But I do have a little bit. And I was so embarrassed. So I told my producer, I'm like, okay, just, don't listen to this pod because I'm so embarrassed reading this in front of you. But I think but other people are okay with that. They like that sort of thing. So I think any genre is great to do Audible. And it was, in Signs in the Rearview Mirror, when I recorded that, a lot of times you can hear my own emotion when I'm reading. And from
Yeah.
the feedback I've gotten was people love that because you can really feel like what was going on in the story and how difficult things were. So it's you're listening to it and it's not just a story about a person that was in this. It's the actual human reading it with the true emotions and you can relate to it so much more. So I think the author really gives it what the book deserves, which is either the characters or the true story just comes out shining the way that they were intended to do.
Mhm. What do you want readers to take away from your books? You seem to have relationships in all three,
Mhm.
fiction and nonfiction. What do you hope that readers will take away from your books?
Well, I'm hoping with all three that I guess across the board is that anything is possible, that
Mhm.
you can leave a relationship when it's no longer serving you. No one has to hit you or cheat on you to leave a relationship. And I also think that you can overcome abuse and live a happy, healthy life. You really can. And then with the wedding, I think it's people can heal and change. People can go through some really bad things and then come out on the other side and be a better human than they were going in. And I think it's also the people around you, your friends, are the most important people in your life. Like relationships to a degree will come and go, but your friends are there. Even if you're crazy, even if you do nutty things, even if you make giant mistakes, like they're going to come back and they're going to be like, okay, you were dumb for that, but we're still here for you, which is a lot of things that happen in this book with some of these characters. They all do boneheaded things and then the friends still rally around them and they're like, yeah, but then they celebrate together. They're your people, so you should really having those strong friendships is super important in this crazy life.
Mhm. And now in your other two books, when you talk about relationships, you're basically, I think you're talking about, romantic relationships,
Hmm.
in the wedding, it sounds like you explore friendships,
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
which is sort of in a different area
Hmm. Yeah.
than that. Now
Hmm.
you're a relationship coach, right?
Yes.
Or tell us a little bit about that. What does a relationship coach do?
Oh, it's fun. I'll put that out there. I work a lot. Actually, I really work a lot with men because of men have been in abusive relationships and they don't know how to move forward. So I kind of speak a lot about that. But I also help people just like either basically I help with toxic relationships, people who have been in abusive relationships and want to learn how to love again and how to date again. So if someone's in a toxic relationship, I can't necessarily help them get out of that. That has to be their own decision. But once they're out and they're free, then I can teach them the what red flags look like now and how dating is going to be so different after you've been in something abusive, and how to manage the new relationships and the new dating that you have after abuse. Because after we've been in something abusive, everything is scary. Everything.
Yeah.
And you overthink and your gut stops working and you don't know what to do. And then sometimes you come out with, different attachment styles. You're mainly anxious and you're, trying to like figure stuff out. And so I guide people to date in a healthier way and help them to understand, like, you might be overthinking this. No, you're on the right path with that. Are you ready to date? That's the biggest question. So I have a little quiz that I give people to see if they're actually ready to date. And then if they're not, then we work through like why they're not ready to date and like what that's going to look like. And if they are ready to date, then we get to set up dating apps and we get to go on dates and talk about dates and different things like that. So it's a passion of mine to help people to understand that even though you've been in something horrific, that there's still love and that there's nothing wrong with you.
Now, is there any training or certificate or
Yes.
that to learn how to do that? Because you've been there yourself,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yep.
that probably your own life experience is what. But is there something else that's done, that is certificate, or how do people become a life coach?
So I
Or
did go through school for that. I did do school for that. It took me maybe about a year or so to get through everything. So they teach you how to listen, they teach you how to talk, they teach you, all these different things. And then they also help you figure out like what your niche is as you're going through. So for me, I knew it was relationships. And then once you figure out that you want relationships, and they kind of help you with that a little bit more. But then of course there's always the continued learning, continued education throughout, which is, either taking little courses online or whatever, just to see what's new, because I'm
yeah.
not personally out there like dating anymore. So I don't know what's new, but so I take courses to make sure I know like what people are going through and how things are going.
Mm-hmm. And do you ever take anything from your clients to put into your books? Did you take anything, and did
Hmm.
anything from your clients inspire the wedding, or is that something I shouldn't be asking?
Oh no, it's a good question. It's an okay question to ask. Yeah, I didn't, because fun fact about the wedding, I started writing the wedding, which wasn't originally the wedding, but I started writing that when I was married, and that was maybe 15 years ago or so.
Oh, okay.
So one character, the whole book was going to be based off of one character in particular. And then as I kind of went through, more and more characters came out, and then it turned into what the book is now. So there really isn't anything I took from coaching except for my own life experiences that's in this. I do have a few characters that are based off of people, not like loosely based off of. And it didn't happen like, oh, I'm going to base a character off this person. This character just kind of became like these people. So it's definitely interesting how that works. But the majority of the characters in my book, which I think are real, they are basically just from fiction in my head.
Mhm. Now, where can people buy The Wedding, or in your other two books? In your other two books, tell people the titles of your other two books if
So
they want to, check out all your books.
yeah, so the first one is Signs in the Rearview Mirror, Leaving a Toxic Relationship Behind. That one's how I got in, why I stayed, and how to get out of a toxic relationship. Out of the Darkness is my recovery program that I went through to heal from everything. And then how all the dates I went on before I met the person I'm with now, all the dates are in there. So all the tea is spilled all over that book. And then the wedding, of course. So all of them they're on Amazon. Two of them right now. Well, all three are paperback, Kindle, and then the first two are Audible. Third Audible is coming out. The wedding, well, the first two can also be found online, Barnes and Noble, Target, different places like that. And then the wedding is in Book People in Austin, Texas. So it's in Book
Uh-huh.
People. It's also coming out to the Sunday Bookshop in Texas as well. So it'll be on the shelves there as well. But you can
Yeah.
also find that on Amazon. And then, of course, my website, kellysmithauthor.com.
Oh, okay. All right. And you're going to be on tour with Irie Book Tours next month.
Yes.
And the wedding, you, as we were just saying, you're working on it in audiobook, so probably by this fall it'll be out
I'm
in
hoping.
audio.
Yeah, I'm hoping sooner than that. Yeah, because they have, I think, one more session of recording, and then it's editing, and then we go. So yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
sounds like fun.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
thank
having
you
so
for
much fun.
joining us today, Kelly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for Authors on iTour, and be sure to follow the wedding on tour next month. Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining us at Authors on iTours. If you enjoyed this episode, then do give us a like and a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe so that you can receive notifications of future episodes of Authors on iTours. In the meantime, happy reading!